I put your thing as a PowerPoint.
Yeah,
Sure, you can just scroll.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم إنا نستهديك لأرشد أمرنا وزدنا علما ينفعنا وبعد. Every year, alhamdulillah, we have this program, the Ramadan prep or the fiqh of fasting. MashaAllah, this is just one more step in welcoming and accepting the month of Ramadan. As we've been speaking about the month of Ramadan, pretty much every khatib comes and talks to us about the virtues of it. And we shouldn't feel that, okay, we get the point now. That's not the idea. The idea is that the more we hear about it, in Arabic they say, إذا تكرر تقرر. وتكاف إذا تكرر تكرر وتكاف in Arabic means for something to be repeated. تقرر, it settles. إذا تكرر في السمع تقرر في القلب. When you hear something multiple times, then in the heart it settles. Meaning you should become normal. It should become normal. That's how much we want to hear about the virtues of Ramadan. That's how much we want to hear about Ramadan, the importance of it, what to do, what not to do, etc., etc. That it becomes not second nature, but our nature. Ibadah in the month of Ramadan is our nature. That if we don't finish 3 juz, 5 juz, we say, oh, something wrong here. One of my classmates, he was visiting India, so he went to one place where they have an i'tikaf program. So the shaykh, the alim that stays there in the i'tikaf, he asked him, are you a hafid or are you not a hafid? So he said he's not a hafid. So the way it works is that everyone comes and they make mashura what to do, how much tartib, how much ibadat, how should they schedule their day, etc., etc. So he said, I'm not a hafid. So he told him, acha, theek hai. So he said, so for you, aapke liye sirf 15 pare. Okay? He said, for you only 15 juz. Because you're not a hafiz, so we give you concession, you should only do 15 juz. So now obviously he's going there for i'tikaf, so what else is he supposed to be doing? That's in its place. But I will say even people who are doing i'tikaf, they will also say by 15 juz, I mean, we have to sleep, right? And we have to just kind of relax as well. And that's the idea what I'm saying, that yani ibadah should become nature. That should become your nature in the month of Ramadan. That if I do not read 15 juz, then I feel there's something wrong. No one else needs to tell me. I can't, I feel there's something missing in my Ramadan. My day of Ramadan, I missed the chance. And this one day of Ramadan is never going to come back. So that's how it should become. Allama Ghazali, rahimahullah, Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, the famous scholar, he says that there are 3 types of fast. There are 3 types of fasting. The first, he says, is Sawmul Awam, or Sawmul Umum. Sawmul Awam means, he says, that you do the bare minimum, which is what? That you do not eat from dawn to dusk. From Fajr time, from the time Fajr time comes in, or Suhoor time ends, Fajr time is in, until sunset, that you do not eat. You just stay away from food, drink, and any sexual act. So he says this is one level of Sawm. He says this is the very basic level. This is the very basic level, and what you'll get out of this is that merely your fard is done. Meaning, in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow when we'll all stand, Yawm al-Qiyamah, you won't be sinful for for missing a fast. That's it. That's all you get out of this Sawm. Which, unfortunately, not most in this community, but most of the people in the Ummah are at this level. That's it. All they get out of the Sawm is that this wajib, this obligation, fard upon them is fulfilled. so you won't get a sin at the day of judgment. As far as the Quran Kareem says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You achieve taqwa and nearness and proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of those perhaps will not be achieved. Maybe some level, minimal level of taqwa, even that's one level of taqwa. But the goal, the objective of what you are supposed to achieve, those high ranks that a person is supposed to reach through Sawm. And the Sawm is something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would go to Ghar Hira, when he was in Hira, before Wahy came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was in Hira. The Hira was the i'tikaf, and in this i'tikaf he would fast also. And what fasting does is that it allows for, it allowed the Nabi to receive wahi. That's why there is such a deep connection between Sawm and the Quran Kareem. Same thing with Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam, when he went to get the Torah, what did he do first? He fasted. Musa alayhi salam, before he received the Torah, he was also fasting. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, same thing. So that's why the Quran Kareem also says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. That between Sawm, fasting, and the Quran Kareem, there's a very deep connection. There's a very deep connection between this. Because in Sawm, when a person is fasting, then there are angelic qualities that come into a person. The malaika don't eat and drink like us. So the idea is that just as the malaika come onto ita'ah and obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. In the dictionary of the malaika, there's no word such as sin. It's not found. They don't understand what it means to disobey. وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They do everything which they have been commanded, whatever they are told. Whether those malaika who have been appointed to perform sajda and sujood, their entire lives, or thousands, from the time they have been created till the time they're in that posture, sujood. If they've been created for ruku', then they're in that posture. Those created for tasbih are over there. Some malaika are created so that they do istighfar for you and I. That's their sole job. Some malaika are created so that every time the believer makes a dua, they should say Ameen. The malaika of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take care of all of these universal laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are fulfilled throughout the universe. So the idea of fasting Sawm isn't that we just feel hunger for a day, although even with that, at least the fard is fulfilled. Not to say the fard isn't, the fard is done, but to bring those angelic qualities into a person. As the Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعُ وَالْعَطْشِ. That many of fasting people, they get nothing out of their fast except hunger and thirst. That's all they get. Is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we were saying that Imam Ghazali rahimahullah said that the first level is Sawmul Awam, that you just stay away from food and drink. Then he says the second is Sawmul Khawas. This is at least one level we, inshallah, all of us can definitely aim for, which is that with not fasting, all other things which affect a person's heart. So everything we hear, we're fasting with our ears now. We won't listen to ghibah. We won't hear people slandering. Other vices which a person hears and listens to, that we will not do. So now your ears are fasting. Then Sawm with the lisan, with the tongue. We will not speak evil of anyone. We will not use evil words against anyone. Words which will affect them. Words which will cause fights. Even if we may think it's very small, right? We will not backbite anyone. Anything which is done through the tongue and it will be classified as impermissible, we will be fasting with our tongue. We will be fasting with our hands. We won't touch haram. We won't touch anything wrong. We won't use it to abuse anyone. We won't abuse anyone with our hands. We'll be fasting with our feet. We won't walk towards haram. Meaning the person's Sawm isn't merely in his belly, as in he's not eating anything, but his entire self becomes Sa'im. Sa'im means someone who is fasting. So the sawm of every limb is to stay away from the disobedience that can be done with that limb, and to use those limbs in the ita'ah and obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you stay away from ghibah, you stay away from all other wrong things. That's why in the hadith of Rasulullah comes that the one who does ghibah, his fast is broken. Meaning the ruh, the soul of your fast is no longer there. I mean, the fuqaha, the jurists, the sahaba, they all explain that what this means is that although if you go and ask the Mufti Saba, I did ghibah, is my fast broken? He'll say, no, it's not broken. But then what is the hadith of Rasulullah saying that it's broken? Meaning the ruh of it, the spirit of it, the taqwa which was supposed to be achieved through it, those angelic qualities, getting close, the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that you have lost. All of that you have lost. That's when the hadith of Rasulullah, two women came, Rasulullah told two women to vomit. They said, Ya Rasulullah, we're fasting, why would we vomit? Nothing's going to come out. So he told them to vomit. When they vomited, then there was the flesh that came out. This was a mu'jiza of Rasulullah. So Rasulullah said that, look, because the Quran Kareem says the one who does ghibah, then it's as if he's eating someone's flesh. And then the third level, this is the highest level, that a person is fasting with his heart as well. Fasting with his heart as well. What does that mean? Meaning no thought crosses a person's mind except it's about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the third one, inshallah, we'll get there. One, inshallah. But at least to the second, we should start. The things which are impermissible, and we're staying away from halal food. Food isn't haram, right? There's nothing wrong with food, but it's halal. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, don't do not eat, therefore we do not eat. So it makes sense that we don't do haram. If halal becomes impermissible to eat, then obviously haram we should stay away from. With that said, the only time a person's ibadah will become an ibadah is if we also follow the sunnah of Rasulullah. So the fiqh of fasting, when we say the fiqh of fasting, this in other words means the way how Rasulullah showed us to fast. Right? So this isn't outside of the ruhaniyah and spirituality. And if someone says, I'm going to fast with ikhlas, but until asr time, then there's no point of his fasting. Why? Because the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that you do it as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it done. And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it done is as Rasulullah has taught us. So even if you have all the ikhlas and you stayed away from ghibah and all of this, and you were only doing tilawat of the Quran, you finished the entire Quran in one day, but you only fasted until Salatul Asr, or if you fasted 2 minutes before Salatul Maghrib, or you started your fast a few minutes into Salatul Fajr, then still there is no spirituality out of that. Why? Because the sunnah of Rasulullah is not there. Our ibadah means that it needs abdiyah. Abdiyah means slavehood to Rasulullah, slavehood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A slave of Allah doesn't get to choose whether it's 1 hour or whether it's 1 second. The issue isn't that I'm only eating 1 minute more. I only had 1 pinch of salt. I just had a little bit. I had 1 puff only. I'm smoking. So that's the idea. Isn't how much the quantity. That's not the issue. The issue is that it wasn't accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that said, inshallah, we'll begin our slides. The definition of fasting. What does sawm mean? To abstain with intention from dawn, from the time Salatul Fajr time comes in, up until sunset, until Maghrib. We've already spoken about this, that exactly where the time starts, that's when we begin. What differentiates between one person doing, nowadays they do intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting means that you skip one meal, or you ate later in the evening, and then you skip a breakfast, and then you have later. And what differentiates between someone who is on a strict regimen of his diet and someone who is fasting, someone who is sawm? The intention. Niyyah is what changes, right? And 2 people can be not eating for the same amount of time. Ahmed doesn't eat for 16 hours, 17 hours, and his neighbor doesn't also eat for 16 or 17 hours. But what makes Ahmed sa'im someone who is fasting and one who will receive spirituality and thawab and rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what differentiates between him and his neighbor. So it's this aspect, that Ahmad not fasting is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the effect of it will be the same, that he will also be hungry and he will also lose weight, right? And that person will also lose weight. But the difference is this, that one had niyyah for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the other did not have niyyah for the sake of Allah ta'ala. He's doing it for himself. So niyyah is what differentiates between, in Arabic they say, between ibadah and adah. Adah means a habit, and ibadah means a worship. So the differentiating factor between ibadah and habit is the niyyah. Now niyyah isn't something which needs to be said. Niyyah is what's in the heart. There's no dua to be read at the time of suhoor. There's no dua to be read at the time of suhoor. If you want to say some words that today I'll be fasting, that's up to you. That's besides the point. But there's no masnoon dua at that time. At the time of iftar, yes, there is a dua. Why is there a dua at the time of iftar versus in suhoor there's no dua? Because sawm isn't something which is done. And du'as are usually said before something which is done. Sawm means not to do. Sawm isn't an act, a fi'l, an act of doing. But at the time of iftar, now because we are breaking and we're opening the fast, so therefore we make this dua, Allahumma laka sumtu ila akhiri, or the other du'as which are there. So a person abstains from food, drink, and sexual gratification. Now when does fasting become compulsory? Either the month of Sha'ban will be 29, so on the 29th night we will sight the moon. We will look for the moon, search for the moon. This in itself is a sunnah. So on the 29th night of Ramadan, we should make an attempt that after Salatul Maghrib, even if we're in Chicago, even if you're in Chicago and usually the hilal is almost never sighted in Chicago. Many years ago, sometimes it is sighted. But even if that's the case, in order to fulfill a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which in fact ulama say that sighting the moon for every month, not just for Ramadan and not just for Dhul Hijjah, for every month is fard kifaya. Fard kifaya, just as Salatul Janaza is fard kifaya, meaning if no one in the community does it, then everyone is sinful. Like that, keeping track of the lunar months, the Islamic months, that is also a fard kifaya, because all of our ibadat and other commands related to our deen are related with the Islamic months. Or the completion of 30 days of Sha'ban. So if the moon is sighted, then that night after Salatul Isha, we will perform our Taraweeh, and the next morning will be Ramadan. And if the moon is not sighted, then one more day, and then the following day at night we'll have Taraweeh. And then the day after that, you'll have our fast. Now who must fast? Who is fasting obligatory upon? If all the following conditions are found in a person, then they must fast. Number one, obviously, is Muslim. In order for any ibadah to be considered an ibadah, iman is a shart. If belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not there, any good action, whether it be charitable, whether it be helping someone, whatever it may be, that in itself is a good act, that's fine. But will it bring rewards in the form of rewards, will it bring goodness to this person at the Day of Judgment? It will not. Number two, a person has to be sane. Insane people do not have to fast. If someone even, for example, is in high levels of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, for example, then they also do not have to fast. Number three, they have to be mature, baligh and mature in the sense of, in the Sharia sense, meaning the person has experienced a wet dream, for example, right? Or if they have never, then they are at least 15 years of age. The years also go by the Islamic calendar. So by the Gregorian standard, it will be about 14 years and 6 months around that time. So 15 Islamic years. The fourth one is that the individual has to be healthy. Healthy doesn't mean that you can run the marathon, right? Otherwise, most of us won't have to fast. Healthy means that if you fast, it doesn't lead to sickness. Right? If you fast, it won't cause any major issue in your health. So for example, someone said, if I fast and midday, I'll get a headache. Why? Because it's my chai time, or I have coffee during this time. So obviously those, if you have caffeine at a certain time, if you don't have it, you'll get a headache. But that doesn't qualify for not fasting. And also those sicknesses which will increase because of fasting, right? So even if someone is sick, but if the fasting does not affect that sickness, they still have to fast, because whether you fast or don't fast, your sickness will remain the same. Number 5, the person is a resident, meaning you're not traveling. In Arabic, they call it muqim. He's not a musafir, he's not a traveler. So what this means is that currently the person is resident. Even if someone has a trip planned for later in the day. For example, someone has to travel for work at 10 o'clock. Their flight is at 10 o'clock in the morning. If you have a flight at 10 a.m. in the morning, today you still need to fast. Today you will wake up for suhoor, have your suhoor, and then you'll be fasting. Now tomorrow when you are in, I don't know, New York or something, and you're musafir over there, you're a traveler, you'll be coming back in 3 days, then you have a choice. Now although you have a choice, if it's possible for you, then you should fast. Because the barakat of Ramadan, the blessings of Ramadan, cannot be achieved outside the month of Ramadan. Right? Even if the Sharia has given laxity, the one who is musafir, he's a traveler, he doesn't need to fast. But the Sharia isn't saying that you cannot fast. It's saying that you don't have to fast. Right? So the barakat and blessings of Ramadan will only be in Ramadan. Even if you do qada outside of it, the same blessings will not be achieved, although the fard will be fulfilled. And lastly, this is only for females, that you have to be free from menses or postnatal bleeding. And that if a lady is in her menses or postnatal bleeding, yani hayd or nifas, then she cannot fast. Even if she wants to, she cannot fast. It's impermissible to fast for her. Now what are those things what break the fast? Fasting itself as an ibadah is very simple. All you have to do is not eat. There's nothing for us to actually do. So what breaks the fast? That when any fast breaking agent reaches the throat, the stomach, or intestines via the mouth, nose, or rectum. So there's a few conditions here. Yani, firstly, where does the agent reach? Where does it go? For example, if it goes into the bloodstream only, then that would not break, right? Because we said that it has to be throat, stomach, or the intestines. And also from where it goes in, that's also necessary. So via the mouth, nose, or the rectum. Rectum means the back area. Or sexual gratification. Any of these would break the fast, right? So for example, if someone is feeling, they go to the hospital and they take IVs. So because an IV doesn't reach into the stomach or the intestines or the throat, that would not break the fast. Many people will be taking their second dose or even their first dose of the vaccine during the month of Ramadan. So that in itself will also not break the fast. Eye drops will not break the fast. But if someone does take a suppository, for example, if someone takes a suppository, an anal suppository, then that would break the fast. Inshallah, we'll have questions at the end of the slides if anyone has any clarifications needed. Now, sometimes when a person does not fast or when he breaks the fast, then we'll say that qada is necessary. Qada means that a person needs to make up that one day. Right? So you missed one day, you make up one day. In certain scenarios, plus the qada, the day that needs to be made up, there is something called the kaffara as well. Right? There's something called the kaffara as well. The kaffara, as it will come, means that a person needs to fast for 2 consecutive months or feed 60 needy people. Those who cannot fast for 60 consecutive months, for 2 consecutive months, 60 consecutive days, they'll have to feed 60 needy people. But in certain scenarios, it will be only qada. In other scenarios, it will be qada and kaffara. So now, when will qada and kaffara be necessary, and when will only qada be necessary? These are some examples of where only qada will be necessary. For example, someone mistakenly eats. Kaffara is a penalty. Even the word kaffara itself means an expiation. So a kaffara is for something which is a penalty. A penalty will only become necessary if someone purposely breaks the command of Allah Ta'ala. So if someone mistakenly eats, an example of mistakenly eating is this, that there is still a few minutes left for sunset. This is very possible that the timetable, it says the actual day, the time is 8:20. Let's say, for example, 8 o'clock, right? But you saw for a few days before, so you saw 7:55, right? So in your mind, sun says that's 7:55. As soon as 7:55, you ate your a date. Now later you look in there and says it's 8 o'clock. So what happens over here? So in this case, the person needs to make qada. As we said in the beginning, the issue isn't of 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Same thing can happen at suhoor time. That you think that today I have until 4 o'clock to eat, but it turns out that you only had until 3:55 to eat. So a person is continuously eating until 4 o'clock. So even in this case, you have to make qada. Qada is necessary, meaning one day needs to make up. Now, because the person, it was a mistake, it was he didn't do it purposely, he won't be sinful for it. You won't be sinful for it. But the fact remains that you didn't fast for the entire time. Therefore, you need to make qada. But just like for salah, right? If we accidentally perform salah and we forgot that we don't have wudu. If someone performs salah and at the time he thinks he has wudu, so he made his salah. After he finishes his salah, he realizes, after maybe a few hours, the salah time already passed, he realized that when I prayed my salatul dhuhr, I did not have wudu. So what do we say? That you're not sinful because this was a human mistake, but you still have to perform your salatul dhuhr. Why? Because the condition for it being fulfilled is that you need to have wudu, and you did not have wudu. So sin aside, that's not the issue. The issue is that because the act wasn't done as it's supposed to be done, therefore it must be repeated. Or if someone mistakenly eats, drinks, or has intercourse, the mistakenly intercourse would be the same thing, that you look at the time and you don't know the time. Or consuming what does not give bodily benefit, such as paper, pebbles. Now you say, well, who would eat paper, pebbles? It's very possible. Some students, whilst they're thinking, they're chewing on their pencil. Now, whilst they're chewing on their pencil, the eraser goes down their mouth, for example. Or someone is just chewing on something, he didn't mean to be chewing on, but he swallowed it. So this something which does not give any benefit, paper and pebbles as an example, that would only necessitate qada and no kaffara. There's only qada but no kaffara. Or medicine taken by other than the mouth, such as a suppository, a nasal spray, etc. Or coercion. Coercion means someone forcefully. Few friends got together, maybe they're non-Muslims, they don't know the seriousness of fasting, and they thought it's very funny and they dumped a whole bunch of water on the person. He drank the water. So again, because the person drank water, therefore he will have to make qada of it, but he will not be sinful for it, and there's no kaffara. Or a person ejaculates by kissing, fondling, etc. This would necessitate only qada, not kaffara. Vomiting. Many people ask that does vomiting break? So just vomiting, merely a person felt nausea and he vomited everything out, that would not break the fast. In which scenario would it break the fast? Only two scenarios. Number one, that you purposely vomited a mouthful, meaning you put your fingers, someone put their fingers and they gagged on it and they vomited. If they vomited a mouthful purposely, this would break the fast. Secondly, purposely swallowing a mouthful, meaning the vomit came up, right? Maybe that wasn't purposely, but then you swallowed it back down and it was a mouthful. A simple way of knowing whether it's mouthful or not, that if you are unable to really hold it, if you're unable to keep it, that means it would be a mouthful. The third would be if someone never started fasting at all. And if someone never began fasting, they said that okay, I'm not going to be fasting tomorrow, then he only has to do one qada. Kaffara will not be necessary. Kaffara will occur as it's going to come only when someone starts it and then purposely breaks it. Or for breaking the fast due to a medical need, right? Breaking the fast due to a medical need. Someone, they're fasting today, they had full intention of fasting, and some medical complication came up and they need to break their fast. They need to drink some water, they have to take a pill or something. So that's fine. A person is excused for this. Sharia doesn't necessitate that you have to complete the fast. However, you would have to make up the fast later. Only one qada, no kaffara is necessary. What are some examples of qada and kaffara, or when will qada and kaffara be necessary? if someone deliberately eats or drinks that which gives bodily benefit, right? So, for example, someone is working and they see today there's a party at work, free lunch for everyone. So he says, I can't give up free lunch. So he eats a slice of pizza with everyone else, right? So then, akhi, that slice of pizza was very hard on you, because now you have to make up 60 days of fasting, right? So the one slice is not worth it. Just wait a few more hours, inshallah, and you'll get a halal slice. So deliberately eating or drinking that which gives bodily benefit. So how about smoking? Smoking or vaping, for example, during fast. This will also necessitate Kala and Kaffara. Now, your question will be that you said that is something which gives bodily benefit, whereas you know the smoking is harmful for you. So bodily benefit doesn't necessarily mean something which is healthy. Bodily benefit means that you do it expecting something for it to give you some benefit. So why does a smoker smoke? Meaning he says that it calms his nerves down. He says it helps him digest it. Whatever reason a person smokes for, he considers it to be beneficial for him. Even if it's for leisure, that's a certain benefit for himself. Or having intercourse, knowing that one is fasting. This will also necessitate qada and kaffara. What is the kaffara? As we said, fasting for 2 consecutive months, or feeding 60 needy people 2 meals. For if this ever happens for a sister, then the days of their menstruation, they won't fast, and then they'll continue after that. So it may end up being longer for them, but easier in the sense that during the days of menstruation, they won't have to fast. Now, if someone does break their fast during the day of Ramadan, and then they found out that it was wrong, or it was done mistakenly, they always knew it was wrong, they did it mistakenly. Now the rest of the days, you don't go and test all the food for iftar. The rest of the day, you have to stay away from food as well. Right? This is called tashabbuh bis-saimin, imitating those who are fasting. Tashabbuh bis-saimin is for 2 reasons. One, out of the azamah and the greatness of the day, the sacredness of the day itself, although you mistakenly broke the fast and you have to do one qada, you should still have ihtiram and reverence for the day, and you don't continue fasting. And you do continue acting as if you are fasting. And secondly, those that will be around you, other people, they will be seeing that you're eating. So out of ihtiram and reverence for them, that they are fasting, then you should not eat. So one who broke his fast, whether it be purposely or not purposely, the rest of the day they should be imitating the fasting people. Or, as we said earlier, that the condition for fasting for sisters is that they should be free of menses or postnatal bleeding. Now, if the menses comes to an end during the middle of the day, right? So let's say, for example, at 12 o'clock she became free from menses. Now, although she'll still have to do qada of that one day, and she cannot fast and you can say the rest of the hours I'll fast and this will be my fast for the day. She'll have to make qada of that. But the rest of the day she should not be eating. She should not be eating for the rest of the day. Again, this is out of reverence for the day and those that are fasting around her. Or if a child becomes baligh, he becomes baligh during the middle of the day, he becomes mature, then the rest of the day he should not be eating. What are some things that do not break the fast? Number 1, forgetfulness. Right? As we said, if someone forgetfully ate. So for example, if it's our habit, like myself, that every time you leave from the masjid, you take a few sips of water from the fountain and then you go, right? Or anytime a person sees the vending machine, or he sees that there's some snack in the car and he just eats it, or he has a water bottle. So this would be an example of someone forgetfully eating. So in this case, this does not break the fast. This is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on the hadith of Rasulullah, that if someone breaks his fast forgetfully, he will not be taken to task for it, and it will be as if he is still fasting, even though he ate. Or a person experiences a wet dream, or someone applies oil, perfume, lotion, balm, anything externally which is applied, right? Even though your skin is porous, despite that, it would not break the fast. Or drawing blood. The hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, that al-fitru mimma dakhala wa laysa mimma kharaja. That if someone draws blood or someone takes out something from his body, this does not invalidate the fast. The only one exclusion, as we said, was those 2 scenarios of vomiting. Dust, or for example, things which you have no control over. Meaning if you're walking in a dusty place and dust goes into your mouth, you're walking in an area where it's very foggy, it's very smoky, then some smoke goes into your mouth. So that's involuntary. For that, a person is not responsible. Or he's walking and a fly, a mosquito or something goes into his mouth. Although it may be very unlikely, but the beauty of fiqh is that all aspects are covered. Or someone takes concentrated oxygen, right? If you go to the hospital and they give you concentrated oxygen, this would not break the fast. Or someone merely tastes the food. Tasting means you put it and you remove it. You just taste it and you take it out, you spit it out. You don't swallow it down. This will come later. The tasting food is obviously disliked, it's makruh, unless if someone has a valid excuse for that. Or if someone wakes up in the state of major impurity. This is a very important mas'ala to understand. If someone wakes up suhoor time and they need to make ghusl, whether it's spouses after relations or whether it's someone who experienced a wet dream, if you need to take a ghusl. If you see there's, let's say for 15 minutes left for suhoor, then you can go have your suhoor. You should rather go have your suhoor, as it will come later inshallah. It's from the mustahabbat and preferable acts of fasting. Rasulullah said the suhoor is ta'amul barakah, so you should go and have your suhoor. And then even if Fajr time comes in, you can still go after that, perform your ghusl, and then come for Salatul Fajr in the masjid. Right? You don't need to make ghusl right away. Meaning you can start your fast in the state of janaba, in the state of major ritual impurity. This happens often, then people get stuck and then they say, see, today I couldn't make my suhoor. So you should have your suhoor. You can have your suhoor, even if Fajr time comes in. After that you can go make ghusl. Obviously, it would be necessary to do ghusl before praying the Salatul Fajr. But it's not a condition for you to start your sawm, your fast, being in the state of purity. Or if water enters through the ear, while you're taking ghusl, you're showering, water goes down the ears, this would not invalidate the fast. Swallowing your own saliva, right? During the day, a person salivates, obviously. So if you swallow that saliva, that does not break the fast. Or phlegm. Using a miswak, rather miswak is mustahab. It's sunnah of Rasulullah. A person should do miswak. Removing the odor of a fasting person, that is permissible. Right? The odor which is in a person's mouth, if you remove that, it is permissible. What are some disliked acts? As you said, tasting without a need. Right? Tasting without a need. An example for a need would be that if someone professionally is a cook somewhere, and that's their job. You're working for a five-star restaurant and you're fasting, you're a cook, then it's permissible for the cook, for example, to taste if he needs to. Or chewing. Chewing itself will also be disliked. And if someone only chews something and they spit it out, right, their fast would not break, but this would be makruh. Now, why is this makruh? One, that if someone else looks at you, they'll say, but this is Ramadan and what are you doing? Why are you chewing? The idea isn't that we say that I'm fasting for the sake of Allah. That's in its place. Your niyyah is for the sake of Allah. But despite that, we shouldn't do things which make other people doubt us. Why would that's why even in the hadith of Rasulullah, a person should stay away from mawadi'ut tuham. Ittaqu mawadi'ut tuham. And don't even go to places where people will say something. And this is connected with that. This is a rule in fiqh. For example, someone says, I'm very thirsty, so they go to the bar to buy a bottle of water. So now, technically, buying a bottle of water from a bar is not haram, right? But if someone sees you entering the bar, what are they going to say? Obviously, they're going to think that you're drinking. So the idea isn't to say that I have my correct niyyah and that's between me and Allah. It's part of your deen that you should stay away from things which will put other people into doubt about you. That's why we say that you stay away from wrong places, even if you're not doing wrong. So chewing, or even if a person is chewing, very possibly it will go down his throat. Now chewing here doesn't mean chewing bubble gum, because if someone is chewing bubble gum, this would break his fast. Why? Because bubble gum has sugar on top. It's coated with sugar. So that means you're taking in sugar. Right? You're taking in sugar from your mouth down to the throat, and this would break the fast. So chewing means something which has no coating on top. You're merely chewing it and then you're spitting it out. Kissing or fondling that in itself is also makruh because it will lead to others, but it would not break the fast. Preferable acts, eating suhoor. As we said, suhoor is ta'amul barakah, and delaying the suhoor. Suhoor should be done shortly before the time ends. Right? Before the time of suhoor ends, that's when you should have your suhoor. You shouldn't have your suhoor hours before. And that's preferable, it's mustahab. That's mustahab. Even if it means a person takes a few sips of water, that would fulfill the sunniyah of suhoor. Or one date, for example. The reason why I'm saying this is because many people, they'll just have a later dinner, right? They just have a later dinner and then they don't get up for suhoor because they have work to go to or whatever it is, so then they just get up for Salatul Fajr. It's permissible, there's no sin in it. What I'm saying is that if just a few minutes before Fajr comes in, even if you get up to have a few sips of water, that will fulfill this mustahab. That's all, you don't need to have a whole meal at that time. And secondly, not delaying the iftar. Not delaying the iftar. As we said earlier, that this is what ibadah is all about. Ibadah is all about doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do at that moment. Right? Yani, just a few minutes before, it was haram for us to eat. Now, because the command of Allah ta'ala is iftar, now we have to open our fast, we have to break it. And to do that quickly, as long as we know that Maghrib time is in, right? Not delaying the iftar doesn't mean to say that if there's a few minutes left for Maghrib, let's just do it before. That's not what not delaying means. Not delaying means once Maghrib is in, now you don't delay any further. This is the madhab of Ahlul Sunnah. Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah do not delay the iftar. Rawafid, they delay the iftar. Shia, they delay their iftar. Ahlul Sunnah do not delay the iftar. Valid excuses for missing a fast. Once, if someone is traveling, as we said, someone who is musafir, he's already a traveler, not that he will travel later during the day, he is traveling. Then that person, is valid for him not to fast. Or number two, sickness. Again, as we said, sickness means that sickness, or such a sickness, if fasting would affect that. Right? If it is sickness, which fasting would make it worse. Now, how does that factor in pregnancy or breastfeeding? So if a lady is pregnant, that in itself is not an excuse. Or if she is breastfeeding, that in itself is not an excuse. But if fasting would affect that, meaning it would make it difficult for her and it would make her sick because she is pregnant as well, so she'll feel nausea, she's already weak, right? She cannot, then that's besides the point. Then she would be allowed because of that sickness. Or if it would cause difficulty for her to breastfeed her child and it would dry her, right? Then also in that case, she may skip her fasting. But in itself, pregnancy and breastfeeding is not an excuse. Or extreme old age. Extreme old age, the idea is that the person will be very frail and they won't have the ability to be fasting. Right? So it doesn't just mean that just because an individual is 80, if they're 80 and healthy, if they're 80 and they're healthy, then they can be fasting. The president of our country is 80 years old, right? Can you imagine that? The man is 80 years old and he's running the country. So extreme old age in itself is not. The idea is that if someone is very old and they're frail and they're unable to fast now because of the old age, then that's excused. Or chronic illness. If someone has a chronic illness, that would also allow a person to miss. Now every time a person does not fast, that doesn't mean that they can just give fidya and say that that's the end of it. Meaning when is fidya allowed for a person? Let's say, for example, this Ramadan a person was sick. For a couple weeks or 1 week or just a few days he was sick. Now at the end of the month of Ramadan, he won't say that, look, I was sick for 3 days, so now I'll give fidya for 3 days. You have to make up those 3 days. You have to do qada in those 3 days. Fidya is only for those people who will never recover from their sickness. Right? Fidya is only for those people who will never recover from their sickness, and they cannot fast any time during the year. So for example, if someone is unable to fast during the summer months because of whatever complications they have, and a 17 or 18 hour fast is too much for them, but they could fast for, let's say, 13 hours, right? They could fast for 13 hours, they can't fast for 18 hours. Then during the winter months, they have to do qada of it. Even then, they cannot just give fidya. Fidya is only for those people who will never regain health and they feel that they will never, or the doctor tells them their situation is such that they will never regain health and they will never be able to fast. Right? So that's why we have that who can give fidya? That person who cannot fast at all throughout the year and has no hope for regaining health. Now, what is the fidya? The fidya is very simple. The fitra amount that we have posted at the end, you see that everyone gives fitra before Eid. So for every day, that fitra amount, whether it's $6, $7, whatever we have up there, that's how much a person needs to give for each day. That is the end of our session on fiqh of fasting, inshallah. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead, inshallah.
So nowadays we are very time bound that to the minute for iftar and even for food. So if someone is eating and there's still food taken a couple of bites, let's say, should they just stop at that moment or can they finish?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the question is that nowadays we're time bound, meaning to the limit, to the minute that we start our fast or we finish our fast. And if you have a few morsels left, can you just finish it? So a couple of things. One, it was always like that. I mean, this isn't a new thing. And the only difference is that previously, and you may perhaps see this even nowadays in Islamic countries, where they'll give the adhan, right? So the adhan, or some places they'll bang on something to let you know that the time is up. So it has always been that as soon as it's the time for Fajr, the whiteness, the Fajr is sighted, then you would have to stop eating. At the time of Rasulullah sallallahu Bilal anhu and Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu, they were the responsible ones for this, for sighting it for the Fajr. So firstly, that was always the case, right? And it's always been as soon as Subh Sadiq has been found. The second is that we know that this is our fard, right? This is a fard that we need to fulfill. Part of fulfilling our fara'id is preparation for these fara'id, right? So if we know, and this isn't something which comes as a surprise, we have a timetable, we know from before that this is the time that I have for fasting. Then just as we know that we need to make it to work at 8 o'clock, for example, so we leave at whatever time is necessary for us to beat the traffic, right? And sometimes that's 45 minutes, an hour earlier. So we know that our fard of fasting, which isn't just something small, it's a fard, right? Sawm is a fard, is gonna end at this time. I can only eat up until this time. Then I should schedule it such as well. So whether I put 1 alarm, 2 alarms, I know that it takes me a few times to snooze before I get up. So then put it half an hour before, put it 40 minutes before, right? So that's the second thing, that we should prepare for our fard in that way. And lastly, directly as what will be the ruling, that if you have a few morsels left and the time is up, then no, we cannot eat, you cannot finish those morsels.
So another question is, let's say someone is heading home for iftar. He doesn't have anything, but he's running late, maybe like 5 minutes late, and that person makes niyyah and swallow the saliva.
The question is that if you're coming back home late from work, for example, and you didn't make it on time for iftar, basically what should you do? And can you just swallow your saliva? So two things. One is we said that eating the iftar quickly and its time, that's obviously when you have something to break your fast with, and that's part of the mustahab, preferable. Swallowing saliva will not count as iftar, because that in itself doesn't break the fast, right? So even during the day, if someone is salivating at, let's say, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he takes down his saliva as we did, that won't break the fast, right? So what can he do? He can simply just come home 5 minutes later and he'll break his fast. He won't be sinful for that, because he didn't have anything with him. But again, as I said, part of preparing for our Ramadan, right? So if you know that you're coming home from work or you're coming from wherever, keep some dates in the car, have a bottle of water, right? That can be something very simply done.
The question is very simple. If the family members have to
If someone has absolutely no assets, I mean even $5 or $6 to give, then no one else has to give on behalf of them. No one else has to give on behalf of them. The question was about fidya. If the person himself, herself has absolutely no means of paying for their own fidya, then does anyone else have to pay on behalf? They don't have to pay. If that person ever receives money later, they'll give, otherwise there's no responsibility. Jazakumullah khairah. Inshallah, may Allah Ta'ala give us all a blessed Ramadan, and Allah Ta'ala allow us to really take benefit and make this Ramadan a very special Ramadan. As we know, last year we didn't have the same opportunity, unfortunately. Our masjid was closed, etc. Let's, as a shukr to Allah Ta'ala, part of our shukr to Allah Ta'ala will be that we do those things which we weren't able to do last year, inshallah, with ikhlas and as best as we can. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.